What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, folks, we got another narrative that the corporate press is trying to run right here again, and it's an old one that they've used before. Check this out. Check it out. Drug and weapons seizures plunge as DHS shifts agents to immigration crackdown, internal data shows. Now, I'm sure it does. But, you know, this is one of these narratives that they put out there that, like, oh, look. You know, the party of law and order, they don't care about law and order. Drug arrests and all this other nonsense is way down, so they're not arresting criminals. But hang on just a second. When you correlate the arrest data and all this other nonsense with criminal alien data, with the border data, you find an interesting pattern, folks. And that is something we do around here a lot. Is we notice patterns. We see these patterns and check them out. So let's get into this, and you can probably see where this is going. Check it, y'all. Drug and weapon seizures by Homeland Security investigations dropped sharply over the past fiscal year as the Department of Homeland Security reassigned special agents from complex criminal cases to support President Trump's expanded immigration enforcement effort, according to internal data reviewed by the New York Times. Once again, folks, they're going to get into the specific data here, but basically what they're trying to tell you with this is that, they took agents off of, actually going after criminals and put them on immigration enforcement. So, there's a lot more crime, right? Right? That's what they're trying to tell you. But they are not actually telling you that. They're telling you something different, right? Everything with the corporate press is always suggestive, right? It's always, they insinuate this or insinuate that. And think about that for a second, right? Should the news be insinuative? If that's even a real word, I don't know. I have no idea. Probably is, probably isn't. I don't know. But, should the news be subjective? Shouldn't it be objective? Like, shouldn't they just give you facts? Like, this is what happened. This man showed up to a liquor store, pulled his pants down, and put his ATM card into a machine. I mean, that should be the story, and then that's it. It shouldn't be, well, the guy may have done this for this reason, but we don't really know, and blah, 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 more at 6 p.m. It's like, why are you just being very, very subjective, right? Why are you insinuating certain things but not blatantly saying these things? This is what the news has turned into, y'all, and it's a shame, folks. It's an outright shame. The report shows that narcotics arrests fell by 11%, new narcotics investigations declined by 15%, and weapon seizures dropped from nearly 41,400 to fewer than 11,200, a 73% decrease. At the same time, civil immigration arrests by HSI surged from about 5,000 to more than 94,500 as agents were shifted to locate and detain undocumented immigrants. You mean criminal aliens? Yeah, criminal aliens, as a matter of fact. But what that's telling you, basically right there, those numbers, once again, when you correlate that with people that were being investigated and arrested as they crossed the southern border for specifically drugs and gun seizures, right? Those numbers correlate together, right? That's how many people that were getting caught with guns and drugs coming across the southern border. Oh, that's convenient, don't you think? Now that the southern border is basically closed and we're not really catching people at the southern border with guns or drugs or anything of that nature, yeah, those people can be moved to immigration enforcement, and that's exactly what they've done, folks. That just goes to show you how manipulative the corporate news is. They're saying they're trying to make the Trump administration look bad. Once again, this is always the narrative, folks. Republicans are evil and Democrats are angels. Or we're just not even going to mention Democrats at all, because if we mention Democrats even a little bit, it'll make them look bad. So we're just going to ignore Democrats and just keep pointing you over here to evil Republicans who are not arresting people that come across the southern border anymore. That's what's going on. But you know what? If nobody's coming across the southern border, isn't that a good thing? Yes. But according to them, I guess it's not. I have no idea. The report compares to the period from October 1st, 2024 to September 30th, 2025 with the previous fiscal year, a span that includes 4 months under the Biden administration and 8 months under Trump. Current and former officials told the outlet that the shift responded to sustained White House pressure to increase deportations. So that doesn't even really give you the whole story here because, once again, that could speak to there were 0 gun seizures and drugs seized under the Biden administration, and all of this came under the Trump administration. That's probably not the case, but once again, that is the news insinuating something. Instead of getting the data for just Biden and just Trump to actually compare and contrast that with to see which administration does what better or worse or whatever it may be, they don't do that. They just give you some of the data and blah, blah. There you go. You figure it out. It's insane, y'all. Although overall criminal arrests rose 41%. Well, that's interesting, don't you think? To more than 46,000, roughly 12,000 of those arrests were not categorized by crime type, making it unclear which investigations accounted for the increase. Does that really matter, though? Yeah, sure, to a statistician, that will absolutely matter to somebody like that. But to your average, everyday American, that doesn't matter. Oh, hang on. Overall criminal arrests rose by 41%. So what is that actually telling you here, right? That is telling you the opposite of what that headline was trying to tell you, that gun seizures and drug arrests are down. Well, hang on just a second. You just told me that, and then you're going to tell me that overall criminal arrests rose 41%? So Trump is arresting more criminals just because you don't have a categorization type? You're mad or something? Like, hang on just a second. We had a government shutdown. You do know that, right? And a lot of these people were off for work, and, so a lot of the data is not going to be properly input into the system, because we had a government shutdown and those people were not working because that was not essential. This is all just wild, if you ask me. They're trying to tell you something, but you don't really know exactly what they're trying to tell you. But the insinuation here is that Trump has pulled people from doing a job and put them doing a different job. That is bad. The report also indicates that HSI opened considerably fewer significant cases, such as those involving global drug and weapons networks, and that indictments remained flat despite the rise in total arrests. Agents reported assisting 20% fewer human trafficking victims. Yeah, the whole 20% fewer human trafficking victims, that's because of the closure of the southern border. Now, I can't really, to be honest with you, explain the indictments part right here. Now, I can speculate as to why that might be. Now, the reason what that might be, what I'm essentially thinking on that is, a lot of these criminal aliens the Trump administration is deciding, instead of putting them through the criminal justice system and having them sit in detention, we are just going to deport people that are here illegally and get arrested for crimes. We're just going to deport them back to their home country instead of putting them through the criminal justice system, because that is also a form of punishment to those people, right? You just get rid of them. They're not supposed to be here in the first place. So that crime that they committed shouldn't have happened. It's our fault. Sorry about that. Let's just send you back home. You got off scot-free this time. Just don't come back at all. We're going to take down your name, your fingerprints, and all the goobly gobbly stuff, and bar you from coming back to the United States. That could easily explain that right there, because we do know the Trump administration is absolutely doing that. So that would explain that. Now, I don't have any concrete data on that because, once again, we just went through a government shutdown, and a lot of that data just doesn't exist. I tried looking it up, couldn't find it though. It is what it is. HSI, ICE's criminal investigations arm, typically handles transnational crime, including drug smuggling, financial fraud, child exploitation, and terrorism financing. Another ICE division, enforcement and removal operations, traditionally handles immigration enforcement. The new data highlights how deeply HSI has been drawn into deportation operations. Yes, because once again, we had a flood of migrants come across the southern border during the Biden administration, and we need all hands on deck to get rid of these people. That's quite clear to me. I am just fine if they are not actually investigating, transnational drugs that are coming across the southern border. I'm fine if they are not investigating human trafficking across the southern border. Why do I say that? That might sound bad or whatever, but you know what? If the border is shut down and there are no drugs and there is no human trafficking across the southern border effectively, I'm just fine with that. Because it's not there, right? It's like if all of a sudden you own a gas station and nobody is stealing anything anymore. There's no need to investigate theft, is there? In a message to staff, HSI's acting leader, John A. Condon, called the increase in immigration arrests a monumental achievement, while White House spokesperson Abigail Jackson said the data showed success, arguing that declines in specific crime categories can fluctuate year to year and accusing the Times of cherry picking. Yeah, that sure seems what it's doing. Once again, it's just manipulated stuff right here. They're trying to take data and then not tell you why, right? They never tell you why. They never expound upon anything. They just give you this data set and say, here, Trump administration bad. That's it. What does this data even mean? Right? You see, and it takes somebody to look through this and be like, well, hang on just a second. Let's think about this for a second. Right? But if you're just an average person reading this, you don't know that. Right? You're just like, well, hang on. I thought Donald Trump didn't like criminals. How come they're not investigating crimes across the southern? They're not even telling you that. But once again, if you look at this data, if you take this news article, just the news article itself, and correlate that to, drug smuggling, guns, human trafficking, everything that has decreased on the southern border, those line up perfectly. Perfectly. Fascinating that is. And it's no surprise that the Latin Times, the New York Times, all these corporate press outlets, they're not going to tell you that. They're just going to conveniently leave that out. Because, once again, they want to try to portray a narrative. They don't want to tell you the facts. They don't want to tell you reality. They cannot tell you the Trump administration is actually doing something good. The findings echo a broader pattern described in another recent New York Times investigation, which found that DHS had diverted thousands of federal agents from investigations into child exploitation, terrorism financing, human trafficking, and illicit Iranian oil sales to staff immigration operations. Yeah, you know what, New York Times? I could care less about Iranian oil sales. For goodness sakes, why did we have anybody investigating that anyway? All right, sure, I understand you got to enforce sanctions. Look, I get it. But why does HSI, or DHS in particular, have to do this? Why does DHS have a transnational investigations team? That's Department of Homeland Security, right? The FBI are the ones that usually investigate transnational crime. That's the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Yes, sometimes I have trouble with words, right? And that is using them just in general. But, it's like, okay, I understand. Look, child exploitation, once again, folks, those are all correlated to the southern border. The decreases correlate to drop-offs from the southern border. So, yeah, if those crimes are not happening anymore, there is no need to keep the agents that were investigating those things investigating nothing. It's insane. In some cases, long-running investigations stalled as agents were temporarily reassigned. Administration officials have defended the strategy, saying immigration enforcement is integral to combating crime and protecting national security. Internal data reviewed by the Times showed that fewer than 40% of people detained by ICE had criminal convictions in the United States. So what does that tell you, folks? Once again, that knocks down another narrative being portrayed out there by Democrats, or being posited by Democrats, I should say, is that, well, how come they're not going after the worst of the worst? Well, that shows that clearly they are. That over 60% of the people being detained and arrested by ICE are actually criminals. Less than 40% are not. And once again, folks, that could be chalked up to the vast majority of that is that when you go to raid somewhere where there may be some of the worst, if you come across any other criminal aliens, you can't ignore those people. You must detain and try to deport them. They're not going to look, they're not going to stumble upon some criminal aliens and be like, well, pretend we didn't see you. No, they're going to be arrested, detained, and all that good stuff. They're going to be put through the immigration process or whatever. And that's just how it is. It makes some better argument here. You want to try to say they're not going after the worst of the worst? Well, the data says otherwise. Well, how come 40%? Less than 40%? That's not even close to the majority. Once again, folks, this is all crazy. I love all of it. I love arguments by Democrats, by the way. But I think I've rambled on for long enough. So you guys let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comment section. I find it fascinating. It just is. It just is. But, y'all don't forget to smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. Share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. Click the join button. Sign up and become a member. That's the best way to help this channel expand and grow. But without any further ado, folks, it's the end. So you guys remember that, look, God has a plan for everybody. And he loves each and every one of you out there. So you guys try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.